All right, it's January the 5th, the year 2017. I think I said in a prior video where I was covering some of Brady's videos that I called it the year 2016. So that habit is hard to break. Also, I should say that this is only my reaction to Brady's video. If you actually want to know what Brady's videos say, you need to go watch his videos like I have, and you'll have your own reaction, right? So I'm not a substitute for watching Brady's video. If you want to understand what Brady has to say, then go watch his 12 hours of video like I'm doing. But I think it's good that I record my reaction so that later on, whether it be months down the road or years down the road, I'll have captured my frame of mind and what I was thinking. But I just finished watching Brady's video, Structuring Part 5, Interference with Officers. And it was very educational, and I wanted to document some of my notes from that. As part of that, as part of Brady's series, I'll call it a lecture series, he refers to this video here, which was, I think, part of Freedom to Fascism. I'm not 100% sure, but it has, I think his name is John Turner, an IRS agent. It also has Joe Bannister, an IRS criminal investigator, and it has Sheila Jackson Lee. Or I'm sorry, no, that's a congresswoman. It has Sherry Jackson, former IRS agent. So I recommend you watch this. This makes the case that there are several people that have held high up positions in the IRS that have come to know or come to the knowledge that their entire organization is a fraud, and there's no law that requires us to pay federal income tax. So this is a good little 2-minute video, and I learned about this video, even though I have watched Freedom to Fascism, I learned about it, and Brady reminded me of this, and so I went and found it and watched it again. Okay, this is a slide I'm putting together of the evildoers that came against Ken Hovind. The first one is the judge. I've talked so much about her, but she's absolutely a wicked reprobate. I have no doubt in my mind that she was biased against Ken Hovind. You have the pedophile prosecutor who hung himself in a jail cell after being convicted of, or not being convicted, but he was caught during a child pedophilia sting. And then you have Michelle Heldemeyer, and her role cannot be understated. She participated in the false prosecution of Ken Hovind and Joe Hovind. And then you have the IRS Scott Snyder. To the right, I'll get to Scott Snyder a little bit more, but to the right of him, you have Rebecca Horton, who's very famous for being a part of Pensacola Christian University, and she's also created a lot of, her name is on a lot of homeschool books, okay? So homeschooling material and things like that. She testified against Ken Hovind, and there's a word that she received her 30 pieces of silver and cashed in on a IRS whistleblower award. I don't know if that's true, but it certainly can be stated that she is a traitor and that she testified against Ken Hovind in court, and her testimony was used to falsely imprison Joe and Ken Hovind. The man below them is a man by the name of David Gibbs III, and he also is a traitor who testified against Ken Hovind in court, and I believe he's still running around today. But the video that I watched mainly deals with this gentleman, IRS agent Scott Snyder. He was trying to promote his own career by taking down a wildly popular Ken Hovind at the time. There's another gentleman that was a partner to Scott Snyder. I think his name is Charles something. I would remember it if I heard it. I sat beside him during the trial, and he is Scott Snyder's IRS colleague. And so Scott Snyder isn't the only IRS agent that came against the Hovinds, but he's certainly the main one. He was allowed to sit at the prosecution's table. What kind of fair trial is that? He was able to sit at the prosecution table during the trial? That's absolutely horrific. But in any event, let's go on to my notes. It may get a little dry, but I find this stuff very interesting. Let me, there we go. You know, as I'm going through all of Brady's videos, there's some questions that, just basic questions that come up that need to be answered. And I've heard what some of the so-called mainstream people think about these questions, but I've also heard there are counter arguments. And I would ask you to think very carefully about this and do your own research. But number one is a minister exempt from income tax on the donations that he receives from his ministry? The mainstream people that I've talked to that have, the job of representing the IRS, and what's generally understood is that ministers are not tax exempt, although they get some sort of tax exemption for a parsonage. But the question becomes even more interesting when you ask the question, if a minister did not sign a 501c3 contract, and if the minister has renounced his Social Security number, therefore eliminating himself from the benefits of the Social Security system and IRS responsibilities, is that minister exempt? Is that even a possibility within our society today, that you can have a ministry that's not obligated or contracted with the government with a 501c3 license? And what does it mean? What does it mean to renounce your Social Security number? And what ramifications happen when you do that? The second question is, does someone have to get a Social Security number? What happens if you don't? Does someone have to get a birth certificate? What happens if you don't? Does someone have to provide a hospital name for a baby at the time of birth? What happens if you don't? I would ask you to look up Baby Holmes, Holms, I believe, in Alabama. Absolutely horrific. I tell you what, when the government forced vaccination onto that child against the wishes of the parents, that would be the time that my switch gets flipped. And I'll just leave it at that. But you don't vaccinate the child against the wishes of the parents, no matter what. And the fact that the government did that, that is way beyond the line. And you can, I better keep my mouth. I'll just say that if I had a baby and you vaccinated my baby against my wishes and you took my baby from me, I don't know what, if there's not any red-blooded American men, fathers in this country left, God help us all. But anyway, let's move on. Is there a legitimate exit gate from the system which can relieve anyone of all benefits and responsibilities, i.e. taxes of the federal government? In other words, do you have to participate in the Social Security system? Do you have to participate in the tax system, or is it voluntary as they claim? Is there an exit gate if your parents got you a Social Security number and birth certificate? Is there an exit gate to that system? I've talked to some people who believe there is absolutely an exit gate, even if your parents subscribed you to the system. Number 6, was the IRS ever legally created by Congress? And what is meant by the Puerto Rican mafia? If the IRS exists, was it created by Congress? Was it created legally? Who created the IRS? Is there a law requiring U.S. citizens to pay income tax? That's a hotly debated topic. The movie Freedom to Fascism by Aaron Russo is a great movie that discusses that. And the case of Ed and Elaine Brown, who are suffering in prison right now, Peter Schiff died in prison. Number 8, can a minister set up a ministry trust? Can a minister set up a ministry trust to handle all the financial affairs of the ministry and not own anything directly? Number 9, what is the legal jurisdiction of the IRS and its agents? Some people say it's just alcohol and tobacco. Number 10, what should happen to people in our society that do not agree with the majority belief on taxes and the IRS and Social Security? Well, let me just say the belief on Social Security, taxes, and IRS authority over churches and even just regular citizens. Did you know that there are some reports that there is 77.5 million people that do not pay income tax, which is 45% of all Americans? Wow. Okay, let's get on to Brady's video, and I'll go through my notes, and I want to go through this in a fairly reasonable time frame here, so I'm going to start talking really quick. Brady's video, part 5, interference with officers. This is my reaction. There's no substitute for watching the video yourself. It was 1 hour and 43 minutes. I watched it all. These are my notes. The original video that we uploaded to YouTube several weeks ago was missing video 4 that has been corrected. So if you came across that video, look for the new one. Brady, in previous videos, number 3, he covered the first 12 counts against Ken Hovind called failure to withhold and pay. He also covered in video 4, let me write that down, covered in video 4, the 45 counts of structuring. Now video 5, he only covers 1 count, and that's charge 58. Okay, and it was only against Ken Hovind and not Joe. He goes through the wording of the statute. If you're going to spend 9 years in prison, you want to understand exactly the wording that was brought against you and supposedly what violation you broke in order that you gave up 9 years of your freedom, lost your family and your property. So Brady goes through in methodical detail the wording of the statute and exactly what charges they brought against Ken Hovind. It's called Attempts to Interfere with Administration of Internal Revenue Laws. I'm going to let you read that, but Brady goes through the wording in detail. Praise God that Brady has a mindset that does that. He was only charged with Section A. He was never charged with Section B, so Section B does not apply. Brady covered... Hey, babe! You understand? Okay, I got a visitor who's coming. He's just going to have to wait. I don't want to remake this video. Brady covers the phrase acting in an official capacity and the due administration of this title. Brady then checks to see if 7212A has matching enforcement regulations, which is crucial on whether the statute can be legally enforced. Brady makes the case again and again that every statute must have matching enforcement regulations. He goes through the Code of Federal Regulations in detail. He talks about how the enforcement regulations dealt only with tobacco products and Ken Hovind was not dealing with tobacco. He makes that case again and again. He talks about there is no regulations, enforcement regulations. He talks about the phrase interference with administration. Whoever corruptly or by force threats of force endeavors to hinder, obstruct the administration of this part or endeavors to intimidate or impede any TTB officer. That's an incredibly important phrase. Any TTB officer acting in his official capacity. He goes through various statutes. All of them say a TTB officer is Tobacco Tax Bureau officer when they come to inspect your cigarette factory. Ken Hovind did not have a cigarette factory. Brady covers the vagueness doctrine again. You can look that up on your favorite search engine. The vagueness doctrine is incredibly important because the average American citizen needs to understand the laws that are being brought against them. There is not yet another example of fraud. Okay. Jury regulations, enforcement of tobacco. Yeah, he definitely brings up the point that the regulations were only to be enforced against tobacco. Brady then addresses the so-called destruction of business records. They claim that Ken Hovind destroyed his business records, but these records contained the customer credit card numbers, the PINs, the CVV codes, the expiration dates, which could be stolen or misused. So not only was it not a crime, it was the responsible thing to do for Kent Hovind to destroy those records. Those records, they said that Kent destroyed as a crime. Kent was actually doing a responsible thing because he did not want that information to be used against his customers that were purchasing his creation, science, evangelism, ministry material. So again, Kent was doing the right thing. They made it into a crime. Brady then addresses the act of paying in cash. They made it out to be a criminal thing that Ken Hovind used cash to pay helpers in the ministry. And on the cash itself, it says legal for all debts, public and private. What else do you need to say? The cash is legal for all debts, public and private. And there's nothing criminal with paying in cash. Matter of fact, Brady could find no statutes that say it's illegal to pay in cash. Brady found that paying in cash is part of what makes the companies exempt from structuring. Brady then returns to the indictment language. about the phrase acting in their official capacity. So Brady starts to research, what does their official capacity mean? He starts to look up revenue agent, a definition of revenue agent. He founds this nice little phrase called Puerto Rico. And I've often heard the IRS referred to as the Puerto Rican Mafia. I've often wondered why they call it that. But if you actually look at the law and the statutes of the United States Code, it calls them an agent of the Commonwealth. It says, and a duly authorized Commonwealth Internal Revenue Agent of the Department of Treasury of Puerto Rico. That's why they call them the Puerto Rican Mafia. Brady looks for a definitive definition for revenue agent. He talks about the differences between the black badge and red badge. That's incredibly important. If you ever meet one of these guys, you want to understand a black badge has enforcement capabilities, a red badge does not. He talks about how IRS employees are allowed to use pseudonyms for their names. So they don't even have to use their real name because they may want to operate incognito because they know what they're doing is going to have backlash from the public because it's deceitful and unethical and illegal. Ken Hovind spoke with Scott Snyder, and Scott even admitted that he knew his authority was only for alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, but that did not stop Scott Snyder from raiding Creation Science Evangelism and Dinosaur Adventureland anyway. Brady provides 8 case laws for acts of federal agents that without delegated authority are void. He even talks about several case laws, at least 2, where a federal agent exceeds his delegated authority and commits a tort within a state. He may be sued if he acts in exceeding his authority. Then Brady dives into the topic of searching for the origin of the IRS. I found this incredibly interesting. Brady talks about his findings. He found an organization called Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, Office of Intelligence and Analysis, but he discusses the lack of a legislative act that resulted in the creation of the agency known as the Internal Revenue Service. At the 2-hour and 21-minute mark, he talks about how if the IRS acts in negligence or recklessly or illegally, they can be subject to damages exceeding no more than $1 million or the amount of the damages done. So if they damage Ken Hovind in more than $1 million, they can even sue for more than $1 million. And I believe in Ken Hovind's case, it is more than $1 million. So that means that Scott Snyder and I wish I could remember that other guy's name. It'll come to me. I could easily look it up. But they are subject to being sued for more than $1 million. There is a quote that Brady gives from Supreme Court Justice John Harlan. It talks about the 2 forms of government and one form acting outside our Constitution. Look up the Supreme Court Justice John Harlan quote, blow your mind. That was actually stated by John Harlan, one of our Supreme Court justices. Brady states that there is no act of Congress to be found anywhere which created the Internal Revenue Service. There's also an IRS quote from Senator Henry Bellman. He talks about if most of the people, if the taxpayers of this country ever discover that the IRS operates on 90% bluff, the entire system will collapse. I believe he was a senator in 1969. Brady cites more code that talks about not just whistleblowers, but also how the agents themselves, the people that actually work for the government, get awarded money when they convict people of tax crimes. And so IRS agent Scott Snyder was motivated to convict Ken Hovind because he gets paid more money. He gets eligible for more awards. That's not a system that is motivated by justice. That's a system that's motivated by money, which we know is the root of all evil. Brady he dives into the due administration because that was a phrase used in the indictment and a phrase used in the statute that Ken Hovind was convicted under. Brady gives the example that if 6 thugs accosted you and stole all your property and beat you up and threw you in a cage, if those thugs were wearing headbands and gang clothes, you would call them thugs. But if they put on uniforms and having a badge that says Internal Revenue Service, all of a sudden people accept that. But regardless, if they don't have the authority to do what they did, they are criminals. It doesn't matter what their clothes say, or it doesn't matter what their uniforms say. Kent goes on to say, was there ever a valid assessment served on Ken Hovind? And he dives into the subject of warrants and whether Ken Hovind had a valid warrant. He refers to that video that I asked you guys to watch from, I think it was, what was her name again? Sherry Jackson. Sherry Jackson, Joe Bannister, and John Turner. So that was a very interesting video. It's only 2 minutes. Please go watch that. Brady again covers the fraud and how the prosecutors misapplied regulations for tobacco against the Hovinds, and they were awarded by the IRS more than likely for the propagation of these crimes against the Hovinds. The judge could have been awarded money as well. Who knows? Brady covers the insane growth of criminal convictions since the 1970s. We've had an almost 700% increase. We have 2.3 million prisoners, and I could go into the prison industrial complex, but that would take me hours. Brady then covers how government servants are eligible for rewards. This is a system that's motivated by awards and not justice. He talks about Rebecca Horton. He talks about a guy by the name of, I think, Brian Popp, P-O-P-P, who was a ministry worker that actually testified against Ken Hovind. Brady didn't cover this, but I remember David Gibbs also testified against Ken Hovind. Brady covers the fact that we have 2.3 million prisoners, absolutely absurd. Brady asks the question, because America has over 730 prisoners per 100,000 people, does that mean that Americans are predisposed genetically to crime? That's a stupid question, right? How come we criminalize more people in this country than anywhere else on earth? It's because we have too many laws that's being abused by the federal government. That's why. And people that came against Ken Hovind, they are guilty of this, and they need to be held accountable. Brady covers again the definition of fraud and how that results in damage to another human being. Brady asks specific questions that if you answer the question yes, which I did, that you will come to the conclusion that the federal prosecutors are guilty of fraud against Ken Hovind and need to be held accountable. So having said that, in conclusion, please go watch Brady's video. This is my reaction. I think Brady is doing a wonderful job at educating me about what happened to Ken Hovind and the misapplication of these criminals and the misapplication of these unjust laws to an innocent man. And I believe that Ken Hovind charges should be reversed. I believe his good name should be restored. I believe that these evildoers should be held accountable. And I believe Kent should be paid restitution for the time that he spent in jail and the property that he lost. And that's what I'm going to be pushing for. Thank you for your time. God bless every one of you, and have a great year.